Good day, students. This is Professor Inglet. Today we are going to go over Judaism. It'll take me two videos probably to cover the entirety of Judaism. Let me share my desktop. So we have a picture here of the Jewish scrolls, the Torah. Notice how it's rolled from side by side, side to side. This is very unique way to read a text, and there are no other religions that read a text in this way. Of course, there are Torahs that are in books too, in book format. Just wanted to reiterate that this is very unique. I have a picture here of the Jewish synagogue in Latvia. Notice in the center, at the very center of the text of the cathedral, the temple, you have the Torah in the center. And during the service, the Torah is read on the bima, this platform, and then it is also walked out into the audience, and the audience members tend to kiss it or touch it with a book. In the synagogue, the rabbi is the teacher or the leader of the community. The cantor is the chanter or singer of the Jewish prayer service. If you've been to a Christian prayer service or service, there tends to be a singer or singers, including instruments, and then the teacher as well. The bima is the raised platform where the Torah is read. The hagbaha is the honor of lifting the Torah. The reason we have these words here, and Hagba is the lifter of the Torah, is to talk about the social aspect of Judaism. Everybody gets involved in the service. Everything is some kind of communal participation. Finally, we have the Galila, one who rolls the Torah afterward. I've taken my students to one of the synagogues in Oklahoma City before, and the rabbi was nice enough to let them go up to the Torah and look at it. It's made out of lamb skin, actually, and it's the pages are much thicker than paper. It's a very beautiful service, and my students thought it took a long time. It took a couple of hours for the service to conclude, but afterwards we broke bread in the community hall, and I think there was also wine that was served. Again, the focus on ritual and communal participation. I have a picture here of a synagogue, a painted synagogue, and I picked this picture because of the star. The star is a very strong thematic element within the Jewish tradition. It represents this idea that Abraham is the patriarch, and that God promised Abraham many, numerous sons and daughters that would be part of the Jewish tradition, as numerous as the stars. So Judaism is monotheistic. I am the Lord your God, have no other gods before me. That's straight from the Jewish Bible, the Torah. God is free of human characteristics or limitations. So there's no God of war, God of thunder, God of the ocean. There's no sky God, none of that. God is free of these human characteristics or limitations. Whereas in Hinduism, you have very much human characteristics related to God. Personification of the weather, for instance. A transcendent God entirely above human conceptualization and characterization. So this concept of God in Judaism is very much that God is beyond, beyond words, beyond conception, beyond elaboration. The Jews take it even further and say that God is the first cause of the universe. You may take a philosophy class and talk about this concept of first cause. What was the cause of the Big Bang? The Jews would say that, well, God was the cause of the Big Bang. What caused God? That is not a question that can be answered. That's too complex. That's too beyond human belief system in many ways. Don Isaac Abravanel, first cause is not an article of faith, but rather of empirical reason. So we have some arguments from reason rather than just empirical faith, according to him. God is perfect. God does not owe his existence to anything outside himself. He always has been and always will be. So that's beyond the concept of the Big Bang. In other words, there is no first cause of God. I simply have a picture here. There's nothing but clouds in the sun. There is, in a sense, that there can be a picture of a human being that looks like God. Because God is beyond that conception. Semak Sedek says Jews are commanded to believe that God is so far above and beyond our limited capacities that he is incomprehensible. Isaiah the prophet says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, talking about God. God's thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways. I think that's a good quotation for this concept of God is beyond capacities. If he's beyond capacities, then how can we know God? That is really the problem of transcendence. If something's so transcendent, then how do we connect to it on an immanent level, on a personal level? And one answer comes from the Kabbalah, if you will. That is a sacred belief within the Jewish tradition. Typically, at some point, it was just for men above the age of, I think, 40, but it's obviously open now. How could God be distant and still interact with us? The Kabbalah says that which encompasses all worlds, that which fills or occupies our worlds. So the answer they have is that God maintains this concept of expressions or characteristics or emanations. And it's almost like mapping out the personality of God. Characteristics or emanations of God interact with us and express himself according to different contexts and persons. So God both occupies and transcends creation at the same time. Once again, if you Google the tree of life, this is the tree of life off to the side, you will see some of the emanations or characteristics of God in these little red parts. That's a little bit metaphorical in many ways, and it sounds a bit pantheistic in style, or possibly polytheistic if we start creating characteristics of God and emanations. But I just wanted to share that one aspect of you on what some Jews look at in terms of the Kabbalah. God's continual sustenance. God constantly sustains his creation according to Judaism. Think of a carpenter building your table and then staying with that table for eternity to maintain it for you. That's God. Were he to cease sustaining creation, all would revert back to nothingness. Gravity would cease to exist and all laws of the universe would falter. So when Jews wake up in the morning, maybe not all, but there is a traditional morning prayer. You say when you wake up in the morning, you, God, existed before the world was created. You exist after the world was created. Another theme in Judaism is, of course, faith. A believer is not characterized by his unquestioning and constant faith in God, but rather by his unyielding desire to believe in God, even when such beliefs desert him. In this picture, we have Abraham and Abraham's mother, and they had to wait over 100 years before their firstborn, Isaac, was born. So Abraham had to wait a long time. And in the Torah, He's constantly wondering when he's going to have a child. And God says, be patient, be patient. And finally he does when his wife is in her 100s. Was she really that old? These are legendary stories. These are stories of the Torah. Numbers are interesting in the Torah. I'm not going to say whether she was actually 100 years old or not. Moses and the Israelites also settled in the desert for 40 years. Did they actually settle for 40 years, or is that some kind of significant symbolic number? That's something to talk about. All these texts, these early texts, have symbolism in terms of numbers. So Moses had to wait to receive the promised land, and actually Moses never did enter the promised land. He passed away before the Israelites overtook the Canaan through Joshua's lead. Joshua was a commander that led the Israelites into the land of Canaan, into the land of Israel, ultimately. So this is a stained glass picture of the birth of Isaac. So we have Isaac as Abraham and Abraham's wife's, I forgot her name suddenly. But anyway, we have Isaac, and then we have Isaac having two sons, Jacob and Esau. And then Jacob having 12 sons, and Jacob's 12 sons are the 12 tribes of Israel: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Joseph, and Benjamin were the names of the sons. And I had to memorize that in a Christian school or a Christian church when I was maybe 6 years old. I still remember it. So I thought I would share that with you, a little gem for the day. God and man. There's an absolute devotion to God, but also room for discussion. And what I mean by discussion is you can argue with God from the Jewish point of view. Moses refuses to be the leader until I think he refuses at least 3 times. And then God says, well, I'll let you take your brother Aaron with you, and he can be the voice, and you don't have to talk as much. So Moses said, okay, we'll do it. So Moses refuses to be the leader before God allows Aaron to be Moses's voice. Abraham's constantly arguing with God and negotiating with God. And Abraham, it says here, Abraham negotiates with God to save Sodom and Gomorrah. The cities were destroyed, but his family is saved. So he makes a negotiation. Abraham's family is saved, but Lot is a person in this tradition as well. And Lot's wife ends up looking back at Sodom and Gomorrah, and she turns into a pillar of salt. This is meaning basically that she doesn't not have the faith and conviction to trust in God, or maybe she had some immorality that existed within her. Jacob climbs a ladder and wrestles with an angel and asks for a gift, and then he also receives the gift. So that's an example of argument as a connection to God. God participates as a sovereign king, yet loving father, close and near. I have a picture here of Jacob wrestling the angel. Took a little drink, sorry. The sacred texts, I already mentioned the Torah. The Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Some sects view Torah as the word of God dictated by Moses. Others think that other people wrote the Torah. Other people think that Moses inspired the Torah's writings, I should say. Don't put the Torah on the ground. The Torah should not touch the ground. I think most sacred books and religions have that view. So we have the Torah, then we have the prophets within the Torah. Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel are the major prophets. Then we have minor prophets: Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, and other writings, Psalms, Proverbs, Job, Songs of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, Esther, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, Chronicles. It is known that the Torah has a different organizational pattern than the Christian Old Testament, so do be aware of that as well. The word Tanakh is also a word that's used within the sacred texts, and the Tanakh is the written Torah, prophets, and other writings all together, so the entirety of the Hebrew Bible. If you take the words Tanakh, Torah, the T in Torah, and the prophets, Nevim, in, and then Ketubin, K, T, N, K, that is Tanakh. The Hebrew language does not have vowels, so T, N, K, Tanakh. And that's part of the problem with translating the Tanakh and the Torah is the lack of vowels within it. So it's very difficult to figure out the meaning. And you'll see 3 or 4 people around the Torah as they're reading it in the service, and they'll correct each other because it's very difficult without the vowels present. Other sacred literature of the sacred text within Judaism is the Mishnah. That's the oral discourse memorized by rabbis and passed down to generations. And these are opinions and rulings of rabbinical scholars, of the rabbis throughout the history. And they are arranged according to subject matter, themes, for instance. And we also have the sacred literature called the Talmud, the Talmud. That's the supreme interpreter of the law. Here's a picture of the Talmud. It's written in an argumentative style. Other than the Hebrew Bible, the Talmud is most important work within the Jewish tradition. So we have the Tanakh, or the Torah. The Tanakh is the entirety of the Hebrew Bible. The Torah is the first five books of the Hebrew Bible. Then we move beyond the sacred text to the Mishnah and the Talmud. So you can see that Judaism has commentaries. Look at these texts like the Babylonian Talmud as commentaries on the Torah. Let's move into some interesting things called the mitzvah, mitzvot. That means doing God's will. It's like a commandment. Think of the 10 commandments. That's the 10 mitzvahs. First commandment is honor, well, not the first, but one of the first. Honor your father and mother. Also, you're not supposed to have any gods but one God before you. So the mitzvahs break down into positive, negative, historical events, human reason, and some that defy human understanding, like some of the kosher laws. So positive mitzvah is those that command action, like honoring your parents or giving to charity. A negative mitzvah is involving a prohibition, like no lying, no stealing, no cheating, no sexual misconduct. So with a no in front of it. Some mitzvahs would be to participate in the Passover or the Shabbat or other holidays, Jewish holidays. There are some mitzvahs related to business ethics, hospitality, and social justice. And finally, some that defy human understanding. Laws of purity, not mixing wool and linen. I think there's one that says don't mix milk and meat. So there are different dietary laws that relate to that. If you hear a cat, that's my cat in the background. I thought I would end this particular discussion by going to the jmu.edu. That's James Madison University. They have an archive of the 613 mitzvahs. So there's 613 commandments. You know some of these. Number 1, to know there is a God. That's a mitzvah that all Jews should follow. To have no other gods before me. To know that he is one. To love God. To fear him. Now I'm going to scroll really fast. just to give you some ideas. The rapist must marry the maiden. It's 132. If rape occurs, this is a very different historical tradition. Then the maiden the man must marry the maiden. And you might ask yourself, wow, does that really happen? The slanderer must remain married to his wife. And some of these you have to go to the Deuteronomy 22:19 to understand it. Not to have homosexual relations. So according to Judaism, homosexuality is a sin, I guess you would say. Not to have homosexuality relations with your father. So obviously incest is also a sin. Now, do all Jewish traditions today believe that homosexuality is a sin? The answer is no. It depends on the sect, and we'll get into that later. A priest must not marry a defiled woman. To be careful to eat only clean birds. To distinguish which sea creatures are fit to eat. So that's dietary laws. And let me scroll. A mourner must not eat the second tithe on the first day of mourning. I'm not sure what mourning means there. I'd have to look up Deuteronomy. It could be a particular holiday that they're talking about, or the death of somebody, perhaps. To bring the first fruits into the temple. So that's positive. The court must count and determine the year of the Jubilee. The court must sanctify the 50th year. So these are very much focused on particular holidays and things like that. To sound the ram's horn on Yom Kippur, the Jubilee year, to free the slaves. Not to work the land during the 50th year. So these are very specific towards contexts. Let's go all the way to 600. Let's see what the last ones are. Feel free to read these as well and make your own evaluations of what these mean. Prepare a shovel for each soldier to dig with. Appoint a priest to speak to the soldiers during war. So this is war policy. So there's certain war policies that have to be carried out. Not to panic and retreat during battle. That reminds me of Hinduism, a little bit, the Bhagavad Gita. Carry out the laws of captive women, and then you'd have to find out what those laws are. Not to sell women into slavery. This is pertaining to war. Not to retain her for servitude after having relations with her. So these are rules, mitzvahs to follow. And I do want you to think about these mitzvahs and what do they mean in terms of the 21st century, and find out, do some research, what do Jews today, how do they view these ideas? And I have a book in the class, a YouTube video in the class by Jacobs, AJ Jacobs, I think is his name, could be wrong. But he talks about a year of living biblically, and he goes through all these mitzvahs as well as he tries to live a perfect, idealistic life from a Jewish perspective from the 613 commandments. We'll stop there. I hope you enjoyed that little information, and we will continue on with Judaism in the next video.